DC or DCC? DC or DCC? Why not both? Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy. Welcome to Coffee and Trains. Today I'm just drinking some Kauai coffee. Thank you, by the way, for the person who told me how to pronounce that right. If you want to tell me what kind of coffee you are drinking and have it featured just like these guys, you can do that in the comments below, and maybe you'll get featured on an episode of Coffee and Trains. Also, this is a Model Railroad Q&A. I do these once a month. If you would like to have a question answered on the Model Railroad Q&A, you can put that in the comments below. I do try to get to most, or if not all, the questions during a Q&A that were posted the previous month. So cheers, guys. So one thing I missed on last month's Q&A was a big source for critiques and everything, and if you're serious and you're looking for critiques, definitely look into an NMRA membership with local chapters. You can definitely get them there. I should have known that since I'm a card-carrying member, but that's a really great place to get critiques for your model railroad or your modules or track plan or anything like that. It's going to be a serious critique, so just be prepared for that, but that's a great place to get advice and critiques. Taos Chung asks, outside of sending the model back to its manufacturer, are there any esteemed third-party services to check up on and repair your models? He says he has a 2009 Broadway Limited locomotive and he wants it to get it checked out. Now, I do not know of any specific third-party services that you can call up and send them to, but I would check with your local model railroad shops. A lot of them have their own service desks that you can have them do the repairs on. I know that the one that I frequent the most, a little choo-choo shop in Spencer, North Carolina, they have a service and repair service where you can bring the locomotive in and they'll take a look at it and see if they can fix it. So definitely check with any model railroad shops that are around you. If you do not have a model railroad shop around you, try looking online for one that has service and then contacting them to see if they would be willing to work on it. I will say that since you said it is a Broadway Limited, they do have a great service and repair service, for that lack of a better word. I actually have a locomotive there right now that got snagged on some scenery and is needing to get some drive rods fixed. So it's been there for a little bit right now, but that is something to consider with a Broadway Limited. They do have a really good service department. Model Railway Fan 38 says, what would you recommend in G-Scale if you were on a budget? Well, there's a couple different things that you can do here, because I have my stuff that I run, and then I also have stuff that my kids can play with and run, and I don't mind if it gets broken. So the first thing I would look at is, if you're on a really tight budget, definitely look at model train shows. I was at one this past weekend where they had some nice cars for about $25 a car, which for G-Scale is really good, especially since these were big passenger cars. Another thing to look at is, I got my kids the Bachmann Lil Big Haulers. So, and they don't really make them that much anymore, but you can find them used on eBay for a very decent price if you're just looking to get some sort of motive power and rolling stock on there. Another option, it's not the most realistic if you're looking to really be on a budget, but go to eBay and search Easy Tech trains. These are more of the toy plasticky type of trains. Now, I don't recommend the locomotives, but the rolling stock, on the other hand, actually works fairly well on regular G-Scale track. I actually connected up with my Bachmann Lil Big Haulers, and that's the ones that I gave my kids to be able to run on their layout, and they absolutely love that. And if it gets broken, it's not gonna really make me too sad. You can get the cars for between 10 and 20 bucks on eBay. So those are some budget options. Also, just train shows. Train shows are amazing for finding deals, and eBay as well, and places like trains.com and any sort of used website. There's a ton of G-Scale stuff out there. So definitely the used market as well. HL Trains 5003 says that they're looking for a good Atlas 4-axle locomotive and N-scale to replace the Gevo on their 2x4 layout. Now, the reason you might want to be doing this is because a Gevo is a 6-axle locomotive, and if you have a 2x4 layout, their track radius you may be using may be a little too tight for it. He says that nothing is showing up on eBay. Am I doing something wrong? It may just be that there's not a lot out there. If you're not too specific on your road names or anything like that, definitely check clearance sections on websites like Factory Direct Hobbies or Train World or places like that. You can just look up like the you can find a lot of Jeeps in N-scale, so GP15s and things like that. From Atlas, there are plenty of them there, but definitely go and try and find the new locomotive on a dealer's website, and if it's too much for you, go and just search it used on eBay or trains.com or somewhere like that. Flint and Dead River Company 2706 asked more about the small cameras that you can run on your model railroad. Specifically, I mentioned a RunCam 5 and also a camera called an Insta360 Go. Now, these cameras are very, very small. They're really designed for either very small applications, or in the case of the RunCam, it's actually designed for things like an FPV. The RunCams are more of like an FPV drone type camera, but these are really small, either cube or very small form factor cameras that you can fit on most rolling stock. GoPro did have the Session, but they don't make that anymore, and the GoPro is too big really for N-scale, and it's also kind of too big for HO scale unless you have just plenty of clearance on the sides of your track, which a lot of us don't. So really, the RunCam 5 and the Insta360 Go, these are both really solid cameras. I'm saving up for the newer of the Insta360 Goes because it has a lot of different applications you can use it for. And so these are two really great cameras. They're just really solid. They're in the same classification as a GoPro. Manshed Railroad asks, will I be doing a video on Arduino Boosters? Now, I'm not going to be doing on a video that you can just make an Arduino booster for any layout, but I am going to be taking a look at the new motor shield from DCCEX and how it works. It's a really great addition to the DCCEX system, but I'm not going to be doing a video specifically for Arduino boosters for any layout. I'm going to be looking at them for DCCEX only. Getting into the boosters for different layout systems and control systems is a whole different animal than doing them for DCCEX. SAC7755 says it just bought a used N-scale Bachmann Union Pacific F unit and it has no couplers. Now, he has some Kato N-scale couplers to install, and he's looking at the locomotive truck, and it appears that he's missing a little U-shaped clip that goes through the little holes on the truck to secure the couplers to the truck. So is it possible to buy some replacement clips? Well, what I would do is, if it's the locomotive I am thinking of, you can go to Bachmann's website and they do have replacement parts you can buy. I've bought replacement parts from their website, so that is where I would start. If you can't, I would definitely look at potentially installing micro trains couplers, and you may have to do some modification to do this. You may be switching from truck mount to body mount on some of these, but if you're going to put a different coupler on, I recommend buying some micro trains couplers. Kato is great, but they're not my favorite couplers. So that is what I would do. Microtrains couplers are kind of like, they actually were the same company as KD, and they split off in two different directions a long time ago, but basically Microtrains is the KD of N-scale, and they have really, really fantastic couplers. Shukaku the Crazy actually asked me 3 questions in one comment. He says, number 1, how do you protect the layout from cats? If someone knows that answer, that would be a place to comment down there, because I actually don't have a cat, but I guess keep your layout in a place where you can close the door. He also asked, how can I tell when my motors are wearing out? He said that one of the secondhand locomotives got, it's always been a bit slow. Now, this could be a couple of things. It could be you could have some grime and dirt and dust that's causing the contacts and not as much to get through, or it could be the motor wearing out. Frankly, I've actually never worn a motor out, and I've only replaced them for DCC reasons, so I wouldn't know what to tell you, but your gears are probably going to wear out before the motor does. And his third question is, how can I deal with my steam engine, small trolleys, and other small motorized items not die when they cross over an insulated frog? So if it was an electro frog, I would be able to say you could just put in a frog juicer or something like that, and that would work fine. But if it's an insulated frog, I'm wondering if it's the plastic or if it's just purely an insulated. If it's still metal, you can probably just hook up an insulated frog to it. But if it's a pure plastic insulated frog, then you are probably just going to have to make sure that your electrical connections are really solid on both sides of that turnout so that you can make sure that it has power no matter what wheel is on it. The Mill Run and Western Rail ask, how do I get my wife to go along with my model railroading escapades? Well, she doesn't always go along with it, and she does set limits on what I can do. Like, I'd probably have a bigger garden railroad if it wasn't for her saying, no, you can't take over the whole backyard. But my wife is very supportive of this. She loves that I have a hobby that I can get a nice little escape to, and she's very supportive of it overall. And yeah, I just always make sure that she is first, my kids are first, and no matter what, yeah, model railroading is always second to family. That's probably the most important thing. Josh Bautista 7725 says he has 3 train layouts in all, HO, N, and O scale with a 4x8 double-decker and a work table on one side for his N scale and a laptop playing train simulator. Should I keep collecting model trains? Yeah, why would you stop? Seriously, if it continues to bring you joy, absolutely keep collecting model trains. Tommy Norwood 5184 asked me, when I do my model locomotive runs for new locomotives for 8 hours, do I run them on the manufacturer setting of 3, or do I first program the road number before you run them? Thanks for sharing. Well, those runs are actually also kind of reviews for when I put them out so you guys can see what they do. And that is actually the first thing that I do with them. I pull them out of the box, make sure they turn on, and then the night after I do that, which is why it's 8 hours, I let them run all night, all the lights on in here running, and my camera time-lapsing the whole thing so I can see if something goes wrong. And yeah, that's the very first thing I do, so they are on the factory settings. Big Dog 5899 says, do you know how to do realistic Western sagebrush? I'm having trouble getting the right color and the brush itself, and he is HO scale. So the first thing right away, you're talking about the sagebrush that's growing on the ground, is I would definitely try making static grass tufts. I do know that they make the color, at least in Woodland Scenics, of sagebrush, so maybe some 7 mil or even taller static grass to do that and just make the little tufts, and then you're probably gonna have to tease them a lot to get that look of sagebrush. May have to like basically just work them into that once you've done the initial application. That would be one thing. If you want to do the rolling sagebrush, which I don't think I've ever seen that truly modeled before. It probably has been, but if I were doing it, I would grab polyfill and just roll up tiny little balls and spray paint it the color that I want. But in terms of sagebrush grass growing, definitely static grass is probably going to give you the best results. You're just going to have to really work it and coax it and tease it. But I do know, I actually think I have some downstairs in my other workspace of the color that would be best for sagebrush. Phil Hampshire asked if I would ever consider making some videos about maintenance and repair of locomotives and rolling stock. He has a bunch of stuff from his dad and would like to keep them running. Well, I've done some revitalization things of some rolling stock, but I've never done locomotives, so definitely it's something I would consider. I'm always looking for new ideas, so I can definitely show you what I do to revitalize old locomotives and things like that to bring them up to snuff. Now, if you're looking for just some normal DC stuff, I will tell you that SMT Mainline, which is probably a channel a lot of you have heard of, he does a lot of buying old stuff at train shows and trying to get it run again. I've seen him do wonderful things with some old Tyco models and things like that. Definitely a channel to check out. The Train Lover DK asks, how many trains do I have? Well, if we're talking about locomotives, I'm not really sure. I know I have over 20 locomotives, which is nothing compared to some people. And then I think I've said I have over 100 pieces of rolling stock. But again, it's a good medium amount. But I've also added a lot recently, so I don't know exactly what all I have. Dale Briggs asks, what 3D printers do I have? Well, I have a Voxelab Proxima 8.9, which is an 8.9 inch LCD 3D printer for resin, and that's what I use for a lot of my detail stuff. And I also have a Bamboo Labs X1C Carbon with the multi-material, the AMS unit that they have, so that I can print up to 4 materials at the same time. So those are the 2 printers that I have. I also have a Prusa Mini that I don't use that much anymore since I got the Bamboo Labs, but I have that as well. That's another great printer. Ligor Czech 6537 says they recently bought some Cornerstone kits that were manufactured in 97 and 99. He says he opened them up and it came with a box of bananas, which basically means it's kind of like it's bent up, it's kind of warped. and he asked how can we straighten these parts out without severely damaging them. I've never had to do this for like severely things, but the best technique is to use some really warm water and just kind of let it soak. So get you like something you can lay flat in and get some really warm water. You don't want it too hot because you don't want it to melt and lose its shape, but the warm water will loosen it, and if it's in like, let's say like a Tupperware or something, it will slowly become more malleable and the weight will hopefully bring it down, or you may have to work it down. But putting them in warm water is going to help that out. It may take a little bit of time, but that's the best way that I've seen to do it. Alco Loco 251 says, hey Jimmy, I'm in a bit of a model train storage crisis. How do you store your trains and supplies off layout? Now, he says he already saw my video on train boxes, which is actually how I store a lot of my trains, but I also have one of these little rolling carts. It's actually the cart that I originally used for the inexpensive craft cart for model trains that now just holds pretty much everything. On the top, I have my locomotives and cases. In the middle, I have my rolling stock, and at the bottom, I have my sets, like my Kato bookshelf sets. That's how I keep my stuff rolling. I also keep all the jewel cases for my locomotives. If it comes with a jewel case, I keep it. And that is how I store especially my locomotives, because those things are very, very fragile, especially at N scale. So I always want a nice safe case for carrying them. So save your jewel case boxes, even the cardboard boxes. The Kato Big Boy came in a cardboard box, and I'm definitely saving that. Using those sports card, those trading card storage boxes, that's a great one. And then just save every case, like the bookshelf things, they come with a storage case with them. So pretty much save all your cases like that. Find a nice shelf to put them on, and if you don't, a nice little rolling cart will work as well. Dave Maddox asked what I used in the Steam and Modern Diesel video in terms of motive power. So the steam engine was a Broadway Limited Light Mikado in N-scale. I'll link that below. The locomotives that brought in the train, those were Scale Trains operator diesels. I will link those below. Those tend to sell out fast, so I don't know how long those are going to be around. And then the switcher that I use is actually an old Fox Valley Jeep 60. Fox Valley doesn't exist anymore. They were just bought by Scale Trains, and that locomotive hasn't been made in a while, so that one might be a little bit hard to find, and no, I will never sell mine for that reason. Froggy Fresh 5956 asked a question that actually a couple of people asked in one form or another in this set of Q&A questions, so I'm going to answer them all in this one. So he says that he is starting an N scale and he's coming from HO scale, and he says if it's DC and he finds a DCC locomotive, can he buy the DCC locomotive and unplug the decoder to make it DC and then later change the layout to DCC and just plug it back in? Well, the cool thing about most DCC decoders is they can actually run just fine on DC. There's actually a setting in JMRI where you can set it to run DC or DCC. And he also asked about layouts and is it possible to run DC and DCC. Well, I actually do that on mine. I had someone ask about installing a switch as well, and what I do is I actually have a barrel plug, and I modified my DCC system to plug into that, and when I want to switch it from DC to DCC to DC, I unplug the DCC system and then I plug in a simple DC throttle, and that way I can run DC trains. So, but to answer fully your question, DCC trains for the most part can run just fine on DC. It's not quite the same going the other direction, but as soon as you convert to DCC, you can run with some systems DC locomotives. It's just not the best for them. But absolutely, you do not have to take out the DCC decoder to run on DC. Most of them are DC compatible. If you have a question that you would like answered on next month's Q&A, you can put that right down here in the comments below. Also, don't forget to tell me what kind of coffee you are drinking as well. And if you have not checked out my other channel, Jimmy's Trains, check that out. That'll be right here. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.